In this Matrix 7.5 video, we're going to take a look at one of the major additions to the updated version, and that is the updated Rhino history. Rhino has added several new history-enabled commands into the program, and we're going to take a look at how you can use those to your advantage, creating flexible models. So one of the first things that I did with the new version of Matrix and Rhino was I pressed the F1 key on my keyboard, and that will give me the Rhino help menu. And when this opens up, we have a keyword search, and the first keyword search that I used was searching for history. And when I do that, we'll find it in our list down here, and we'll double click on that. So it gives a brief explanation of what history is, but the most important thing that I wanted to look at and show you was as I come on down, you can see there is a large list of commands that now have history enabled on them. So as you scroll down, you'll see several of these brand new options that have history enabled through the program. Right? In Rhino 4, the previous version of Matrix, there was maybe 10 to 15 history enabled commands. This list has really expanded and allows us to create flexible, easy models to work with. So I'm going to close this out. Now, to use history, the first thing we need to do is check out our info and settings menu. You can see here is the icon for Rhino history. We want to make sure that's on. Typically, in previous versions of Matrix, we used to like to make sure we go ahead and we had that turned off. But I like to have this on now with Matrix, depending on what I'm doing. So with that turned on, the other thing we can do is we could actually go to our command line and type the word history in, and that will give us some command line options. Are we recording history? Yes, we are. Update, we want that turned on to yes. And then we have a broken history warning. And I like to use that. You may have seen this at some point when using Matrix or Rhino before, that when you break history, a little pop-up menu appears. Now, as we create some more complex history trees, menus, this is actually very helpful because it lets us know if we did something slightly out of order, and then we can get our history back. So I like to make sure that's turned on. Maybe as you get more experience, you can disable that. So we'll hit enter to confirm. So let's give a quick talk about why history is important. I'm going to create a simple sphere. Okay, and then I'm going to take this sphere and I'm going to make a copy of it. So copy is one of the history enabled commands, and we'll take our copy of a sphere and place that on a separate layer color. So now what history does is if I take this original red sphere and I move it anywhere, that green sphere automatically moves and follows along with it. So you can see no matter which way I move this, the green sphere updates. Also, if I were to, for example, scale this, the original red sphere scales, the green one automatically updates. What this is referred to is a child-parent relationship. In this case, the red sphere is the parent and the green sphere is the child. So anywhere the parent goes, the child automatically follows. Now, one of the things that happens is if I were to take this child and move it, for example, you would see we get the history has been broken message, because once we move the child on its own, it loses that relationship with the parent. So if I hit OK, and now I were to move this original red sphere, the green one does not update. All right. If I hit undo and get back to that original point, you can see now when I update the original, now it's reestablished the parent. All right. So that is a brief explanation of a child and parent relationship. Now, one of the things you can do also is the green sphere is a child of the red. But let's go ahead and create a copy of the green sphere. So now, this blue sphere is a child of the green, which is a child of the red. So if I move this red sphere around, it updates the green, which in turn updates the blue. All right, so we can create several layers of history, and that when you update the very original one, everything after it that is built on that updates as well. All right, now if I were to move the green one, for example, you notice again I get that broken history message. However, because the blue was a child of the green, it still follows. All right, but it lost its relationship with the red. All right, so you can sometimes have 4, 5, 6 different layers of history happening depending on what you create. Okay, so now I've taken this, and the gray sphere is the child here of this particular blue sphere. So if I move it, the gray follows but breaks its history above it. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some other useful tools that we can work with in terms of history. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my curve menu. And as I do this, I'm going to create a small tick mark right here. And I will create another one over here as well. All right, so I just create 2 little lines. And the main reason that I did that is one of the new history-enabled commands is blend. So if I were to take from my curve menu the blend curves command, and I click on my first curve and my second curve, you can see I get that blended curve between our 2 little reference lines. So the reason that this is important, that it's history enabled now, is if I were to move this tick mark around at all, you can see if I move either one of these, that because of history, my blend automatically updates. So you can see as I move this curve around my viewport, this blended curve is constantly updating based on the new little red tick mark's position. Okay, so the next thing we could do is we could create another set of tick marks. I'm actually going to go ahead and select this one and this one, and we'll hold down or tap the Alt key. And I'm going to make a copy of those. So now these are tied into history with this one. So if I move this up, you can see this tick mark follows along. All right. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and use blend curves again. So we'll blend from here to here. So we get 2 different blended curves, creating a couple rails here. Now if I were to move this one down, you can see the red tick mark here on the bottom, because it's a child. This one here is a child of this one. It automatically follows along and both of our blends update. Same with this one over here. If I move the ones on top, my blended curve updates. So now that we have that, we can use this as a basis for a couple of rails to perform a sweep. But to perform a sweep, I need some profiles. So let's go ahead and I'm going to create a couple more little tick marks to create a profile with. So I'm going to go right here to the end, make sure I snap to that. I'm going to use another viewport here to hold down Shift. So we'll create one there. And we'll create one here as well, holding down Shift. Just creating these typical little tick marks that we use to blend with. And then again, I'm going to select both those downward facing tick marks. And in this case, I want to make copies of them so that the other blended curve there has those downward facing tick marks as well. But to make sure I set up a proper history relationship, so if I move one, the other automatically updates, I'm going to use the duplicate command. Okay, so if I duplicate, it's going to ask you to point to copy from right there on the end. and then move to that end and press enter. So now if I move those two tick marks, you can see both of them automatically follow. So I just made sure I select both of these together, and then they automatically update. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and do blend curves again from here to here. So we create a little small profile there. Do the same thing on the other end. Blend curves from this one to this one. Alright, so now that we have two rails, two profiles, we can perform a sweep. So if I go to my surface menu, we already have history enabled sweep commands. Sweep to with history, that is a GemVision command, and that would work. However, regular sweep to is now history enabled through Rhino. So if I use sweep to, just plain Rhino version, I can pick my two rails. We'll select our cross sections, and we press enter. And if you've ever used sweep to before, you know that you get this menu. One of the advantages of using the Rhino sweep is the add a slash function. Okay, so I could add a slash through here to straighten out those iso curves and my surface. All right, we hit enter and OK. So now that I've added that slash in there, we have our history advantage right there. All right, so now, again, if I select these two little tick marks and I move them around at all, you can see that matrix automatically updates this particular sweep as I move this around. All right, so the way that we have this set up, let's talk about that for a second. So originally we started with this tick mark and this tick mark. So the blend was a result of these tick marks. So the blended green curve here is a child of the two red tick marks because they're a result of that. So if I move them, they update. And then we also have these two little profiles, which are a blend, which is a child of this and this tick mark. And then we have the sweep, which is a child of the two blends and the two profiles. So it all starts back with these couple little tick marks that if I move around, up, down, anywhere, you can see the blend updates and then the sweep updates as well. Right? I could even take one of these single profiles and I could rotate this, and you can see we get different results based on how I do that. Right? So lots of different ways that you can move these around to update this swept object. All right. So now if I go back and I were to select one of these, for example, and I move this, we are going to get a broken history warning. All right. My sweep and blend still updates. That's fine, but what happened was these two tick marks were a child of these two right here. So now that I've moved them, they have lost their relationship with the original tick marks. So if I move these over here, down and around, you can see this set no longer updates and maintains. All right, so that's one of the things you got to look out for as you move this. Make sure you move the originals unless you are indeed trying to move these on their own. Just know that you will lose your history in that case. That's where the broken history warning comes in. Okay, so that is a look at history. There's lots of ways you can do this. As I said, there are a lot of new history-enabled commands that you can find in the menu. So one of the things here that has been built is a simple kind of twisted bypass ring. And when you were trying to build something like this, previously it wasn't too hard to do within Matrix, But what would happen is if you were trying to manipulate anything about this particular model, sometimes it was a complete rebuild. But because of history, I'm able to move around little blended tick marks like we just did on a larger scale, and then you can see your entire model update as you move it around. Okay, so this is an example of setting up a more complex history tree. So in the second part of this video, we'll explore how to create and set up this particular ring and have this history enabled on our piece.